Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. It's good to be home from Uganda, where I just spent 11 days working on our wells of life, providing access to clean water to now 450,000 people, saving the lives of over 30,000 children. It's absolutely amazing. Now, today we have a really special show. My guest today is Sanford Coggins, founder and CEO of VisionWise Capital, a company focused on providing private investors access to commercial real estate opportunities. VisionWise Capital controls $70 million of real estate assets since its startup in only 2013. Now, let's check out a couple of Sanford's impressive credentials. And I have to admit, the first one was brought up today, and that is he was a quarterback at the University of Texas. So that probably counts for something. Sanford has a unique background as a commercial real estate broker principal with 25 years as a wealth advisor. He worked for 16 years as vice president wealth management advisor at Merrill Lynch, where he managed over $100 million in client assets. And Sanford, while there, earned the Merrill Lynch Lifetime Achievement Award for Leadership and Excellence. Now, after that introduction, today, oddly enough, we are not going to talk about investing. Instead, I want to chat with Sanford about the nearly forgotten value of honor. Character values, such as honor, seem to have been replaced by a new version of success, which is rooted primarily in financial attributes. Now, Sanford is a man, he's not a perfect man, but he is a man with strong principles, and he is a man with a strong personal code of honor which guides his mental and physical behavior daily. And as a man committed to the biblical text, he tries to maintain those principles regularly. So let's bring on Sanford Coggins to chat with us about the disappearing value of honor. Sanford, welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Charlie, this is exciting to be on your show.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, and you have no idea what to expect, and that makes it even more fun.
My eyes are wide open. I've known you for 20 years. I think the real honor is being invited onto your show, having that you've known me for that long and still think I have something to say here.
Oh, well, since I'm investing with you, I have to listen to you.
Well, we're going to separate out a little bit of that today. There's definitely a need for greater character in the world of investing.
Oh, there really is. You know what's let me ask this question first. Do you agree or disagree with my belief that honor is becoming a fast disappearing value in American society?
Yeah, the question really has everything to do with the definition of honor. And do we really have a stake in the ground as to what honor represents or what it is? And I think that's the moving target. It used to be you had character qualities that had sort of a tetherball pole sort of definition, where the ball may move, but the pole didn't. Now you're finding that different people have different perspectives of where the pole is located. So honor drifts and sometimes gets confused with things like ethics or things like just being nice or kind. And so, yeah, I think that there's a definitional challenge, but the reality of it is people know it when they see it. They recognize honor, and they recognize being honored, and they recognize someone being honorable.
Yeah, that's well said. And I did a bit of research before the show, as usual, and I have 10 qualities of what honor would mean. And it is certainly not an exclusive list, but it will at least give us grist for something to talk about.
Certainly.
Now, something you'll find interesting, and I think everybody will, that I did a bit of research on the history of self-help books. Now, self-help books, there are hundreds of thousands of them out there now.
Sure.
But in the 18th and 19th century, and really throughout philosophical history, self-help books before the 20th century focused on character. They focused on attributes like honor, integrity, maintaining a higher standard, nobility, righteousness. And I'm thinking of people like Emerson and Thoreau and even Nietzsche. That people are surprised at how strong Nietzsche was into character values and meaning of life. And we go all the way back to one of my favorites, Seneca the Younger, in the early 1st century A.D. at the time of Christ. But then something happened in the early 20th century. Another author came along named Napoleon Hill. Now, many of our listeners may be familiar with him, but Napoleon Hill totally changed the landscape of self-help from character to success, from character to success. Mm-hmm. And he had books like, his first book was The Law of Success, the next, The Magic Ladder to Success, and then his most famous, Think and Grow Rich. And that is the idea of self-help books now. They may be not quite so externally motivated as internally motivated, but they're not about character. They're about building the perseverance and the grit and the work that it takes to be successful in the world. And I do enough in international travel, especially to developing worlds, and success is defined completely differently. I mean, it's just, the United States is a weird place. I mean, it's I don't mean that negatively. I just mean it's an unusual place. There's really no other country like it.
That's true. There's no question about that. But it's also true that the people that you find flocking from one country to another aren't generally aiming at Vietnam. They're coming here. The opportunities here are magnificent as well.
Yeah, and as long as they can get in. It seems to me that the American dream has shifted to personal privilege, greed, and then even moving to the most unethical ways of achieving these goals. That, we found that in 2008, with the banking system and the ethics of the banking system, which are, the more we find out about it, the more shocked we are at what happened with that there was certainly no honor going on in that realm. What is your take on that?
I think this conversation's fairly broad, but I think it can be narrowed in terms of capitalism, which is what you're describing, and the effect of capitalism on the character of the individuals within it. And one of the things that I find I have to say about this country is it may be an amazingly dysfunctional place to live, and the governmental system may be horrendously lopsided in favor of certain socioeconomic groups. But the flip side of it is I really do believe that Winston Churchill had it right in terms of as maniacal and as bad as this governmental system is. It's the best thing going in the world.
It is. Absolutely.
So what we end up with is a scenario where money actually changes people. And as time has gone on and capitalism has become more understood by a larger body of people in this country, I believe that change is happening to more and more people. And the change that I see is what money does, which is it gives people authority to not be vulnerable. It gives them the ability to control their circumstances more and not be subject to. And I think innately human beings don't want to be subject to. They want to control their destiny, their current circumstances. Money allows for that to occur a lot better than when you don't have it. So what's interesting about that, though, is as we know, authority and control and power can corrupt. And the more of it that you have that's unbalanced without any vulnerability or subject to, the more you're likely to do things the way you want to do them, when you want to do them, and have disregard for others. So it's a systemic issue. I'm not sure how to turn that around without capitalism actually growing a heart to go alongside of it.
Yeah, I have several times on the podcast say that capitalism in the recent years has sort of made a transfer from an economic system to a dogma. It's almost a belief system. Rather than an economic system, it's a belief system that drives our behavior, and it's not done in a necessarily in a healthy way. But let's get on honor, and I do agree with you that it is. I think it's difficult to define because it's almost a lost attribute.
It's one of several character qualities, and when you take it back to its roots, at least as far back as we need to, you have founding fathers that had honor. They were honorable people. And there was a political system at that time where you didn't really want to be a politician. It was something that you served your country, and it was something that you got talked into because there wasn't the gain that there is now for being in that position.
Right.
So but if you look back to where the founding fathers received their definition of honor, then you find that was a faith-based honor system that had its roots in a source document. The challenge we have now is we don't go back to the source document to identify and how to navigate through our ethics, our character qualities, and ultimately our honor now. And without going back to the source document, you have an opportunity for that tetherball pole to move however you choose.
Yeah, that is exactly true. I think the source document is critical, as well as, they're just, as I said, there have been philosophers for ages, and they've never talked about wealth. They've never talked about money. That's just, as a matter of fact, even Seneca was quite wealthy, but he never talked about that. Talked about living in more of a normal life.
Yeah, there's a Proverbs that says that a good name is better to be desired than great riches. You think about that.
Funny, that's funny that you say that, because I'm writing in a developing country that I work in. Everybody knows the country, but I don't want to embarrass the country by saying it. But there's a lot of corruption going on. So we are writing a zero tolerance for unethical behavior, and we're defining what those sorts of things are, and it is amazing that they don't even view them as unethical.
Yeah.
It is part of the society. It is part of the culture. It's part of the way things are done that makes it oh so difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people, you could call that mission drift, right? It's like people will actually move the plumb line as a convenience matter for the way they behave.
Well, it's a convenience matter, and also, boy, I didn't intend to go this way, but it's important to know that in these countries, these people make no money. I mean, in Uganda, for instance, 50% of the population is under 15, and they, if they make extreme poverty is less than $1.90 a day. Poverty just goes all the way up to $2.50 a day. Half the world's population lives on less than $10 a day.
Yeah, you know what I really appreciated too about your statistics on water. My understanding is there's 1,000 children a day that die from water that's just undrinkable.
There is. It's one every 40 seconds to a minute.
Yeah.
But that's worldwide. That's not just in Africa. That's worldwide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in poverty, the number one cause of poverty is lack of access to water.
Yeah.
That's the number one. That's what gets the whole negative ball rolling.
So to your point, a larger dose of honor would prevent a lot of that from happening, because people would actually execute on what's right as opposed to executing on what's beneficial.
That's a great way to put it. I like that a lot. That's a great way to put it, Sanford, to exercise what is right rather than what is beneficial. And ideally, what is right is beneficial at the end of the day, but not maybe the way you're looking for it. We're going to work on a little bit of piece that I got from the internet that defines honor. So we will we will talk a little bit more about defining honor. But, you know, I was thinking about it. Even without a definition, everybody knows what honor is.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, you know, it's not like I'm using some obscure word. And I really, it's just a recent revelation for me, the idea of honor. I've had other character qualities that I've looked at, but I've never really focused on honor and thought, man, you know, if I were to die today or die recently, and or you know, in a recent period of time, if people were to say that I was an honorable man, I would feel like I probably achieved everything I needed to achieve.
Yeah. That's an enormous benefit to be able to be conceived or considered honorable just by virtue of not only is the word not used often, but when it's used, it's an intentional phraseology. It's not something flippant that someone would say off the cuff if they didn't mean it.
You know, isn't that true?
Yeah.
Maybe because it is so unused that the use of it really does draw attention, and an honorable person is quite obvious. So what I want to do is discuss the question, what exactly is honor, and what does it mean to live an honorable life? And I found a piece online by a man named Frank Sonnenberg, he actually wrote the 10 ways to live with honor and integrity. And I junked 2 of them, so I have the 10 ways.
Okay.
He had the 12 ways. I have the 2 ways. And what I'd like to do is, there's no way we're going to be able to get through all 10, but they are 10 different definitions of or attributes of honor.
Yeah.
And I would like to discuss each one as much as we can get with you. But before we do that, this is our break time. We take a 20, 30-second break, and
Okay.
we'll come right back.
Great. This is Charlie Hedges, and you're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie and my special guest, Sanford Coggins, who is founder and CEO of VisionWise Capital, which is a wonderful organization since I'm invested with him. And it's focused on providing private investors access to commercial real estate opportunities. And he just does a great job with his clients. But today, I know Sanford personally. We've known each other. We've talked today at least 20 years. And Sanford seeks to be an honorable man. That is one of his goals in life. And he has a strong personal code of honor. And when I first started doing business with Sanford, I didn't need to see a lot of resume. I knew Sanford. I knew this was a man I could trust. I knew this was a man of his word. And when he said something, he meant it. He wasn't going to go against it. And you just don't find a lot of people now that do that. As our producer was saying, with his father and the generation before ours, honor was a big thing. You wanted to be an honorable person. But it is no longer as not met with the same level of esteem as it once was.
No. So let's go through these my 10 ways to live with honor and integrity, and And we will start with the first one, and that is to value integrity. And I'll read, he writes a little bit on it, so I'll read it and then we can discuss it. To be prepared, I love this statement, to be prepared to compromise your point of view or your viewpoint, but never compromise your principles. So you can compromise the way you think because you get new data, get new information, new experiences, so you can compromise. It's not compromise, it's just modifying that, but you don't modify your principles to reach a goal.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I see that as being integrity, and I see it also being in a form of deference, where deference is me allowing myself to reduce my own personal rights to allow yours to exist. And I think oftentimes people miss that. When in a conversation, it's more important oftentimes for us to express our point of view than it is to listen and actively listen to the other. Integrity, to me, one of the definitions I've heard about integrity that I really like is it's doing the right thing when no one's looking.
That's really good. So it becomes a personal value.
It is. I mean,
hard personal value.
Sure. Do you, when you're walking across a parking lot that isn't yours, do you pick up the piece of trash and throw it away, or do you walk by it? It's easy to do either one.
Yeah.
But there's a certain level of integrity of owning the fact that you want your environment to be clean and therefore being a participant in having that happen.
Yeah, without the government helping, like in Rwanda. Do you know Rwanda? You cannot take plastic, any kind of plastic, into the country. On the plane, I had a hidden. They call it a hidden stop, where you stop and you just sit on the runway for an hour waiting for other people to come on the plane. But they said if you're deplaning, you must get rid of all of your plastic. No plastic bottles, no plastic bags, and it's all about the environment, keeping the environment
Understood. Up. Yeah, keep it on the plane.
Keep
and
it
take it back where it came
Keep
from.
it on the plane. But I liked your idea about value and integrity, and I think it's it's part of my world view that I often say, don't believe what I say today because I could change my mind tomorrow. And that's about viewpoint, because if I get new data, I can get new data, I can get new information, I can talk to different people, read different things, and all of a sudden I discover what I once believed. There's enough evidence for me to make an adjustment on that, and I'm not afraid to make an adjustment.
Yeah,
that's it.
That brings up another character quality of humility. You have to be humble to be willing to let go of your viewpoint in favor of one that's better.
Yeah, I guess I've never thought of that as humility. I've thought of that as wisdom.
Well, I suppose it applies wisdom to your humble being.
Okay, so the first one was value integrity. The next one is really interesting. I have to read what he has to say about it, but he says the second one is be confident. And what he means by that is don't let your behavior be influenced by others who do not share your values. Hold yourself to a much higher standard, which is your conscience. Your character is on display every moment, every day. Make sure it reflects you and causes people to feel proud to call you a friend. So I like that idea of being confident, that you're confident in your values, that you don't fall prey to value shift.
Interesting. Yeah. That's interesting, because I can see where there's clearly a need to have confidence, but doesn't that have a risk of interfering with the first point of being willing to actually actively listen to someone else's perspective and be willing to give up your own?
It would. If you deal it in that context, it would be in contradiction to the first one. But if you think of it in your principles, be confident in your principles.
True.
That you are not going to compromise your principles, then that's confidence in what your values are. And I don't want to say that your values don't even shift. I mean, there's core values, deep core values that never shift.
Yeah.
But there are other values that are more social values.
Yeah.
Then I may shift those as I learn. There's a place that I learn in that too, and say,
Yeah.
what I used to think is no longer really faithful and honest to the people, because I'm very much, although I may be a Christian man, I'm very much a humanist as well, and I care about all the planet, about all the
More holistic.
every one of God's creatures.
Yeah.
And I learn more about it as
Yeah.
I go along.
I see there the contrast being perhaps principles versus perspective. I believe that principles are like the laws of gravity, for example, where it doesn't change, where if I drop something, whether it be a feather or a book, it's going to fall, maybe at a different rate, but gravity is going to do what it does. But the perspective is different between the feather and the book. One falls very gently and the other one doesn't. So I can change my perspective, but it's a little bit more, and should be more challenging, to have my principles change. Somebody's going to have to really convince me that gravity doesn't work.
Yeah. Yes, and principles are like gravity. They are like science, that they are ever true, and since creation, they're going to maintain that the same truth
Yeah.
is going to continue throughout the history of mankind.
Yeah, and I believe that if everyone were to go back as far as you just did to identify the consistency of the things they argue, they would find their alignment with truth would be greater. You went back to creation. Most often people go back to last week's newspaper. That's not far enough back to really get a trend line to establish principles.
No.
But if you do it right, you're right, the principles don't change very often because they're just locked into actual laws that just simply are.
Yeah, that's why I don't talk a whole lot about scripture on the podcast, because I have a wide audience that are various faith traditions. But in the Bible, in Genesis, the first chapter of Genesis really means a lot to me. It's a very principle oriented. It's a very principle oriented chapter, especially the grand sort of, I use another word, it's not commandments, but it's the be fruitful and multiply, take care of the earth and rule over every living thing. And that is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to populate, take care of that. We're supposed to cultivate the land, which we're doing a terrible job of cultivating the land. We're not doing it. And we're supposed to, when it says to rule over a living thing, I like to phrase it as God with a small g. God has asked us to be God with a small g. And that we are to control what goes on with the help of a divine power, of a divine assistance and divine guidance, and even divine opportunities that God will provide.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, if I don't take a first step forward, if I don't do anything, then nothing's going to happen.
So you know what's fascinating? This is a fascinating conversation because it's really dealing with morality, the conversation of honesty and honorableness. But when you think about that, there is a reality that just stuck out as you were speaking, that when you go back, you find that if you go back far enough, then something happened way back there. And one of two things it was. One, this God that you just personified either made man or man made God. One of the two things are true. If in fact you believe there is a God at all, then the question becomes which one, because if God made man, then God gets to make the rules. But if it's the other way around, then man gets to make the rules and can fashion God to be whatever he wants God to be.
And what's the use of a God in that light?
Well, it's very convenient because then it allows me to move the tetherball pole when it's convenient for me and beneficial to describe something or to act on something or not.
and I get to blame it on God.
I get to do whatever I want to do. I make the rules.
Okay, let's go to the next one here. I want to get through 4 or 5 of these because I think they're getting better as we go along. I think this one is pretty obvious. He calls it do what's right, make good choices, I like this, follow the spirit as well as the law, as well as the letter of the law.
Yeah.
Follow the spirit of the law as well as the letter of the law. And I that's strong for me personally.
Yeah.
And care not only about where life is taking you, but about how you're getting there as well.
Yeah.
And so that certainly is honor and again, integrity and honesty.
Yeah. It would be honorable in the context there to treat someone well who is in a tough situation, even if they don't literally say it. But if you know they're in a tough situation and you can help, the spirit of the relationship is to help them, as opposed to waiting until they somehow or another press it out in words and trust that if they don't say it, then they must be okay.
And most people are not going to say it.
Right.
You know, it's the American way. You're afraid to be weak.
Yeah, and it fits also in the context of contracts. We know what the right thing to do is. Oftentimes the languaging in a contract is inferior because all of the what-ifs just hadn't been thought out properly. But knowing the right thing to do and not doing it is a choice.
It is. Absolutely, it is a choice, and the right thing to do is actually different in different cultures, because a culture will determine the norm for that society. That's why I'm such a strong individualist that I don't fit quite in the middle of the herd, because I like to say my religion and my life, I try to use my brain and try to figure it out. Like I was just in a country where corruption is rampant, and it's high level government corruption, but lower level people, it's just taking bribes, giving bribes, getting paid under the table, hiring friends. This is just normal behavior. They've been taught this since children. They don't look at that as corruption.
Yeah.
It's not viewed as corruption.
Just a way of being.
It's just a way of life. But we, as a nonprofit in that country, we have to bring our values over, and we're writing a zero tolerance to unethical behavior.
Yeah.
And letting people know, I'll train the people, and everybody will sign it, from the CEO from the highest to the blue collar worker out in the field.
Yeah.
Everybody will sign that and know for breaking any of these rules, which are taking bribes or leaking information, sexual favors, sexual harassment. You know, just a handful. It's not a truly exhaustive list, but it's grounds for immediate termination.
Yeah.
I don't care your level. I don't care who you are in the company. Everybody can be replaced.
Yeah. Well, you're hitting on another really big subject, right? At the end of the day, you have a moral code that is despicable by some and acceptable by others. How does that happen? And I'll tell you, one of the uniquenesses about the United States is we were founded on basic principles, and those principles were Christian principles. So what we've done is we've now taken our Christian principles over to countries that have not been exposed to that level of morality, and we find it disgusting. But who says that it is? It is really just the fact that we were raised in an environment where our morals were dictated by something other than what theirs were.
Excellent observation. It is part of the culture. What I try to do is not to change the culture as much as to say, these are the values of this organization. If you want to work with this organization, we have a moral code, an ethical code that we live by, that everybody that works with us will honor this code.
Which by definition is a standard.
It is a standard.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a standard, but it's just for working for us, and it's not judging. It's not judging them because I know a man that I think is pretty corrupt, and yet he works for the government. He makes $130 a month.
Yeah.
And so if he doesn't do some of this money under the table, he can't pay the bills. He can't rent his house and take care of his family, and this is just the way they do it.
Yeah.
And it is something that's difficult.
You
So
certainly have to pick your battles.
you have to pick your battles, but this is one that I'm feeling pretty strongly about, and that is to work for us. We have a zero tolerance, especially among our higher level people.
Yeah.
That they exemplify that to the other people. Let's move to our next one, which is also part of honor, and that's to be honest and transparent. When you stand for honesty, everything you say carries a voice of credibility. When you're dishonest, you're soiled. Your soiled reputation will do the speaking for you. The fact is, honest people never fear the truth. I like that. I think that idea of being honest and transparent is credibility.
Yeah, it fosters credibility because people can tell when you are or when you aren't. You immediately pick up someone who's lying. It shows up, and it's maybe indescribable, but you can feel it. You can see it.
You really can, and it's just, and it's very disturbing. And they're not uncommonly the best speakers, the really popular people, and you take a look at the way they're doing their business, and
yeah. The more frightening scenario is when you can't tell they're lying and they're lying, and then when they're that good.
Well, when they got that good, you can't tell. But yeah, I try to ask questions if I'm going to get into bed with somebody. I want to know them.
Yeah.
Business wise, I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's it's especially in business, this issue of honor is a relevant topic because oftentimes I think that even the investor looks at how much money they can make and will bypass character flaws. I know that for me, even in the hiring process, it's a model that I call CCF. The first C is character. I mean, if they don't have the right character, then they're going to disrupt the ethos of my company. And that's just not an acceptable scenario, no matter what the second C portrays, which is competency in doing what I need them to do. But that last letter, that F, is the most challenging one. It takes more time to actually identify, and that's fit. Do they really fit the ethos of and the culture of the company? And that takes a while to figure out. There's some people that just by virtue of the way they are and the rules of life that they ascribe to, it just doesn't fit. And I think that's what you were describing with your employee base. You're saying that if they don't reach the standard of being willing to not do those things, they can't be a part of this organization. It's just not a right fit. They may be very competent, and I'm not even going to challenge their character in general, but there's some flaws there that just don't fit with this organization.
That won't work well with your organization. That's the words of Jim Collins. That's the right people on the bus
in the right seat.
In the right seat of the bus.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's critical. So our next one, we just did honest and transparent. Our next one, I want to, since we're running near our time here, because I know you have a 5 o'clock appointment, so let me pick the ones that I want here. This is too important. Honor your word. There is just, I don't know anything more important than that. And he says, if you make a promise, you put your own honor and integrity on the line, and keeping that promise should be as important to you as it is to the recipient.
Yeah.
And you know what I find? I have made this mistake. I've learned it. I've learned this lesson the hard way, and that is, I will make a promise out of deep compassion, but without really thinking through, do I have the capacity, the bandwidth to fulfill that promise?
Right.
And you know, I've made the mistake of not being able to fulfill it and going back and kowtowing to the person. But I think that's, I find that that's really common, is that people will make promises, and I don't think it's based on trying to get their way or trying to be dishonest. I think it's actually out of compassion, and they want to help so badly, they say, yeah, we'll help, but when it comes time to it, they just don't have the bandwidth to take care of that.
It requires discipline not to overextend, but it also requires just the point you're making. You have to understand the gravity of making a commitment and breaking it. And if you really understood how that affected your reputation, then I say my reputation, if I really understand that, then I avoid it at all costs, and I measure what I commit to. I'll never forget, this is a little bit of a transition, but my daughter was about 4 years old, and she was coloring at this little Tykes table. I'll never forget sitting down with her and asking, hey, can I sit down? She says, sure. And so I sat down and said, can I ask you a personal question? And she's just colored away. And she says, without even looking up, she says, sure, Daddy. And I said to her, I don't know why, but I was prompted to just ask her, have I made a promise to you that I've not kept? And she didn't even hesitate, Charlie. She said, well, there was that time when you said you were going to take us to Disneyland, and you didn't. And there was that time when you said you were going to take us to the park. As she was speaking, I literally could complete her sentences because I remembered. But here's what I remember. I remember them not being promises. I remember them being ideas. Kind of like, we should go to Disneyland next weekend. But it was a promise to her. I believe we have to be so careful about the words we speak to people that we make sure we understand what we're committing to and what we aren't at every given moment. Because invariably, they will take off a commitment that we don't fulfill. They won't circle back, and our reputation is damaged, and we won't really even know.
I can't tell you the meetings, when I was first involved in a discipleship with a very influential mentor. And there was a couple of times I had meetings with him, and he would have more important meetings than meeting with a mentee. But what it did to me personally, it was devastating to me personally, because I was looking so forward to this meeting.
Yeah.
But really, I just got a signal from my producer saying I have 1 minute, and I've got 6 other things to cover.
By the way, just to complete the circle, I went back and took her to Disneyland and some other things to make up for it.
See that let's finish with this last one here that is right in line with what you just said, and that is part of being honorable is accepting personal responsibility.
Yeah.
And that is, be prepared to accept the consequences of your actions, as you were. Knowing what's right isn't as important as doing what's right, and being aware that yours will not always be the most popular road traveled.
Yeah.
But I am that's a big subject with me. Personal accountability, personal responsibility, I think is so important. And so in our entitled culture that is becoming more and more of an entitled culture, personal responsibility is just going out the window. It's that I'm entitled to this because I am who I am. And it's great. Well, Sanford, I think we probably covered 6 or 7 of the living with honor. Do you have do you have any last words you would love to leave our audience about honor in our life in general?
Yeah. Well, Charlie, first of all, I appreciate being on the show. It's been a delightful time, and it's been a while since we've talked about it and tried to make it happen. I'm glad we got the date on the calendar and made it work. But I will tell you this, I'm not a guy that has somehow or another honor in the bag, clearly that. It's more of a pursuit that I think is important and maybe even critical, because reputation really is large, and not one that you fabricate, but one that you actually earn. So if there's anything I can say about this conversation is it needs to continue and probably needs to expand so that your audience can actually recognize that this is really a serious matter. It's not a game. It's an issue where people get impacted, and negatively so, when we don't stand up and do what we commit to doing.
Thank you. And when we do that, we do such great good for the people, because we show the people by being honorable, we demonstrate care and compassion.
It's true.
And nobody needs anything more than care and compassion. Well, Sanford Coggins, it was a most enlightening time. I knew talking with you, because you have such a commitment to morals, ethics, and integrity and honor, and like all of us, none of us are perfect. You explained the situation with your daughter where there was something amiss, but you rectified that, and that was a teaching in and of itself. That was so good. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great having you.
It's been an honor, Charlie.
Thank you. And I also encourage everybody to check out what's your website?
The website is visionwisecapital with an al.com.
Yeah, check out if you're interested in investing and you got a little cash. It's a great place to go. You know you're going to a place with honor and integrity, and you will be dealt with well. I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and be sure to check us out at our website, thenextchapter.life. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.